In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, Marcus Thorne was a king, and his annual company Gala was his coronation. This year, he stood with his mistress Isabella on his arm, ready to claim the ultimate prize. His wife Amelia was supposed to be at home, a forgotten, simple woman he'd deemed unworthy of his new life. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman he betrayed. While the mistress took the stage to claim their shared victory, the ballroom doors swung open, revealing a wife no one recognized, and a truth that would bring an empire to its knees. The silence in their Upper East Side penthouse was a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, the sound of space that had once been filled with laughter and conversation. Amelia Thorne stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the river of headlights on Fifth Avenue, but her gaze was unfocused. The city lights, once a shared dream, now felt like a million glittering eyes watching her loneliness. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, was a man forged in the crucible of ambition. When she'd met him, he was a brilliant junior analyst with a charmingly crooked smile and dreams that seemed to light up the world around him. Amelia, with her quiet intelligence and unwavering belief in him, had been his anchor. She'd proofread his reports, talked him through nerve-wracking presentations, and celebrated every small victory as if it were her own. She had put her own promising career in corporate law on hold to be the foundation upon which he built his empire. Now he was Marcus Thorne, Executive Vice President of Thorne Industries, the sprawling conglomerate his father, Alistair Thorne, had built from the ground up. The crooked smile had been straightened by expensive orthodontics, and his dreams were no longer shared over takeout on their tiny apartment floor. They were announced in boardrooms and whispered about in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, and in the process the man she loved had become a stranger, replaced by a polished, impeccably tailored effigy who moved through their shared life with the detached efficiency of a CEO managing an underperforming asset. The Thorne Industries annual gala was less than a week away. It was the social and corporate event of the season, a night where fortunes were made and careers were cemented under the grand chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. For years, Amelia had attended on Marcus's arm, a quiet but proud partner. But this year was different. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you?" Marcus had asked 2 nights ago, not even looking up from his tablet. He was scrolling through market projections, his brow furrowed in concentration. The question was casual, but the dismissal in his tone was a physical blow. Amelia had been arranging flowers in a vase, a small act of defiance against the sterile modernity of their home. Her hands stilled. "Of course I am. It's the gala, Marcus. I've already been in touch with a stylist." He finally looked up, and his eyes, once warm and full of adoration, were coolly analytical. He scanned her simple linen dress and bare face as if she were a line item he was about to cut from a budget. "Amelia, listen. This year is critical. Dad is about to announce the new global VP position. It's between me and Isabella Ricci. The entire board will be their international investors. It's not a social call. It's the final round of the longest job interview of my life. And I've been by your side for every other round," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "Why would this be any different?" "Because," he said, sighing with a theatrical impatience that was becoming his default mode, "you don't fit. Not anymore. The wives of the other executives, they play the game. They run charities, they sit on boards, they know how to network. You're wonderful, honey, but your world is here." He gestured vaguely around the silent, opulent apartment. "You wouldn't be comfortable. and frankly, your presence would be a distraction I can't afford. A distraction. That's what she had become. The anchor was now a dead weight. Each word was a carefully chosen dart designed to wound her confidence until she retreated willingly. He was telling her she was not enough, but wrapping it in the language of concern. The name Isabella Ricci hung in the air between them. Isabella was the company's brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless chief of mergers and acquisitions. She was everything Amelia was not, sharp-edged, dressed in Tom Ford, and armed with a smile that could close a billion-dollar deal or cut a rival to shreds. Amelia had seen the way Marcus looked at Isabella in company photos. A spark of shared, ravenous ambition she hadn't seen in his eyes for years, not since he had looked at her that way. "I see," Amelia said, turning back to her flowers, her posture rigid. "So you'll be going alone. It's better this way." For us, he'd said the lie smooth and practiced. He'd already stood up and walked to the bar to pour himself a scotch, the conversation for him already over. Now standing by the window, his words echoed in the empty space. It wasn't just about the gala. It was about the late nights that were no longer explained the scent of a perfume, something expensive and floral like Chanel No. 5 that clung to his suit jackets, and the second phone he thought she didn't know about. It was about the emotional chasm that had opened between them, a vast, silent canyon she could no longer pretend wasn't there. Her phone buzzed on the marble countertop. It was a message from her best friend, Julian Croft, a fiercely talented but still struggling fashion designer. "Did you decide on a concept for the gala dress yet? I have a sketch for that emerald silk we talked about that will make every jaw in the room hit the floor. Call me." Amelia's fingers trembled as she typed a reply. "Change of plans, I'm not going this year." Julian's reply was instantaneous. "What, call me? Now." She ignored the call. She couldn't bring herself to voice the humiliation to say the words out loud. "My husband is ashamed of me. He thinks I'm a liability. Admitting it would make it irrevocably real." Later that evening, Marcus came home humming a tune she didn't recognize. He seemed lighter, energized. He dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie. "Big day," he announced to the room at large. "Isabella and I finally broke through on the Petrocorp merger. It's the deal of the decade. If we land this, the VP position is all but guaranteed." He didn't specify who the "we" referred to. "That's wonderful, Marcus." Amelia said, her voice a perfect imitation of the supportive wife she was supposed to be. He walked over and kissed her on the forehead, a gesture so devoid of passion it felt like a corporate formality. "See, this is what I'm talking about. The pressure is immense. The gala is the final presentation stage. Alistair wants Isabella and me to say a few words about the merger. It's our victory lap. There it was again. The new us." He disappeared into their bedroom to change, leaving his briefcase on the floor. For a moment, Amelia just stared at it. It was a sleek leather vessel of his new life, a life from which she was being systematically excluded. A dark, unfamiliar impulse rose within her. For 10 years she had respected his privacy, his space, his work. She was his trusted partner, but she wasn't that anymore. She was an outsider. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she knelt and clicked open the latches. The interior was organized with his signature precision folders, a laptop, a tablet. But nestled in a side pocket, tucked into a velvet pouch, was a small square box. It was a shade of deep red, so iconic it was instantly recognizable. Cartier. Her breath hitched. Was it for her a peace offering? an apology for his cruelty about the gala. Hope, fragile and foolish, fluttered in her chest. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace. It wasn't a delicate chain or a simple pendant. It was a statement piece, a river of brilliant cut diamonds, cascading from a central, impossibly large sapphire that glittered under the dim light like a shard of the midnight sky. It was breathtakingly beautiful. And it was not her. Emilia's style was classic, understated. This was a warrior's jewel, a trophy to be worn by someone who commanded attention, who walked into a room and owned it. It was a necklace for a woman like Isabella Ricci. The hope in her chest died, replaced by an icy certainty that froze her from the Santurute. This was Isabella's reward for the Petrocorp deal. This was the jewel that would adorn the neck of the woman who stood by her husband's side at the gala, the woman who had taken her place. She gently closed the box, placed it back in the velvet pouch, and secured it in the briefcase, her movements steady and precise. She clicked the latches shut. When she stood up, the reflection that looked back at her from the dark window was not of a heartbroken wife. The tears she expected were not there. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but within them a new light was beginning to dawn. It was the cold, hard glint of resolve. Marcus had called her a distraction. He had deemed her unworthy. He had tried to lock her away in their gilded cage. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. It was Emilia who had taught him how to read a balance sheet. It was Emilia who had stayed up with him for nights on end, helping him research the arcane legal precedents that won him his first major case for the company. He had discarded her, but he had forgotten to take back the knowledge and the strength she had given him. The gala was in 5 days. He thought he had barred the door. He had no idea she was about to build her own. The days leading up to the gala became a masterclass in deception, a silent, brutal war waged within the pristine walls of their apartment. Emilia became an actress, and her performance was flawless. She played the part of the chastened, compliant wife. She agreed that Marcus was right, that the gala was too much pressure, and that she would be much happier at home with a book. She made his favorite meals, asked about his day with a convincing smile, and wished him luck on the final push for the Petrocorp merger. Her compliance seemed to relieve him. He became more relaxed around her, almost magnanimous in his victory. He no longer saw her as a problem to be managed, but as a settled issue, a box that had been ticked. This carelessness was his second mistake. It allowed her the space she needed to uncover the full architecture of his betrayal. The gaslighting had been happening for months, a slow, insidious erosion of her reality. Every suspicion she'd voiced had been turned back on her. Another late night, Marcus Emilia, the deal is at a critical stage. You know that. Why are you trying to make me feel guilty for working hard for us? Who is Isabella, who keeps texting you after 10 p.m.? She's my colleague. We're leading the biggest project of our careers. Do you want me to fail? Your insecurity is becoming a real problem. This shirt smells like perfume. I was in meetings all day. People wear perfume. My God, you're becoming paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone. He had made her believe that the problem was her, not his behavior. He had painted her as jealous, unstable, and irrational until she had started to question her own sanity. But the sight of that Cartier necklace had been like a lightning strike, illuminating the entire twisted landscape of his lies. Now she saw his tactics for what they were, not a defense, but a deliberate, cruel strategy. Her investigation began with the shared family tablet, she hadn't touched in months. He used it for personal browsing, assuming she never looked at it. His search history was a digital diary of his affair. Reservations for two at Daniel, a restaurant he'd always claimed was impossible to get into. Hotel bookings at the Carlyle for nights he was supposedly on a red-eye to Chicago. Receipts from luxury boutiques on Madison Avenue for gifts she had never received. And then there were the photos. Tucked away in a hidden folder in his cloud storage was a collection of pictures of him and Isabella. They were in Paris, a trip he'd claimed was a solo corporate retreat, smiling under the Eiffel Tower. They were on a yacht, the sun glinting off the water, Isabella in a bikini draped over him. In every photo he wore the same expression, the unguarded, joyful smile she hadn't seen directed at her in years. He looked like the man she had fallen in love with, and seeing that man with another woman was a fresh, searing pain that eclipsed everything else. She scrolled through the images, her breath catching in her throat, a wave of nausea washing over her. This wasn't a recent fling. This was a life. A whole parallel life he had been living behind her back. For how long? A year. 2. She thought back, recontextualizing every late night, every business trip, every moment of manufactured anger. The scale of the deception was staggering. The final piece clicked into place when she found the emails. Using a password she had helped him create years ago, the name of their first dog, she accessed his personal account. There, in a neatly organized folder labeled Project Nightingale, was his correspondence with Isabella. It wasn't just romantic, it was a business plan. They weren't just lovers, they were conspirators. They discussed the Petrocorp merger in detail, but they also discussed Alistair Thorne's impending retirement and their strategy for ousting other senior executives. Their plan was to secure the global VP position for Marcus, with Isabella as his second-in-command, effectively giving them total control over the company's future. But one email sent by Isabella to Marcus just 3 weeks ago made Amelia's blood run cold. Subject: The E problem. Marcus: We need to discuss the Amelia situation. Your father is a traditionalist. He values family and loyalty above all. A messy divorce on the eve of the announcement could be catastrophic. It would make you look unstable. He might pass you over. You need to keep her managed and out of sight until after the gala. Once you're named VP, your position will be unassailable. We can handle the fallout then. Give her whatever she wants to go away quietly. But until that promotion is signed, she is your biggest liability. A liability. The same word he had used. It hadn't even been his own. It had been Isabella's. He was a puppet, and Isabella was pulling the strings. The humiliation, the patronizing dismissal. It was all part of a calculated strategy to manage her. Amelia closed the laptop, a terrifying calm settling over her. The grief was still there, a hot, aching core in the center of her chest, but it was now encased in something harder, colder. Rage. Not a hot, screaming rage, but a glacial, focused fury. They thought she was a problem to be managed, a simple domestic creature who could be placated and then discarded. They had analyzed her as a business risk, a variable to be controlled. They had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. She stood up and walked to her closet. Pushing past the rows of tasteful beige and navy blue outfits that Marcus approved of, she reached into the very back. There in a garment bag was the person she used to be. She pulled out a tailored pantsuit, the fabric still crisp. It was from her time at the law firm, a life she had packed away. She had been good at her job. Sharp, analytical, and relentless. Marcus had loved that about her, before he decided he needed a wife who was a soft cushion rather than a whetstone. He had told her she wouldn't fit in at the gala. He was right. The old Amelia wouldn't. The quiet, supportive wife would have been swallowed whole by the sharks in that ballroom. But she had no intention of going as the old Amelia. She picked up her phone and dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring. Finally, I was about to send a search party. What is this nonsense about you not going to the gala? Amelia took a deep breath. I am going, Julian, she said, her voice steady and clear. But I need more than a dress. I need armor. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Julian, who knew her better than anyone, could hear the change in her voice. The tremor of hurt was gone, replaced by steel. Armor, he repeated slowly, a grin evident in his tone. My darling Amelia, what kind of war are we starting? The kind you win, she replied. And I need to look like a queen, taking back her throne. Julian Croft's studio in the meat-packing district was a chaotic wonderland of fabrics, sketches, and half-finished creations. It was Amelia's sanctuary, a world away from the cold, minimalist perfection of her penthouse. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of silk and hot tea enveloped her, and Julian was there, pulling her into a fierce hug. All right, he said, stepping back and holding her at arm's length, his sharp eyes taking in the dark circles under hers. Spill it, from the top, and don't leave out a single sordid detail. And so she did. With a cup of steaming jasmine tea warming her hands, she laid out the entire story. The lies, the gaslighting, the other woman, the secret life, and the cold, calculated plan to discard her. She told him about the Cartier necklace and Isabella's email labeling her the E problem. As she spoke, the story transformed from a source of shame into a case file, a set of facts to be analyzed and acted upon. Julian listened without interruption, his expression shifting from sympathy to righteous fury. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, sketching idly on a notepad. So he finally said, his pencil moving with sharp, angry strokes. The plan is not to show up and make a scene. It's not to cry or throw a drink. It's to walk into that room and remind every single person there, especially him and his paramour, of exactly who you are. More than that, Amelia corrected him gently. I'm going to show them who I've become. Julian's eyes lit up. Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Forget the emerald silk. That was for the wife. We need something for the queen. Something that doesn't whisper. Something that roars. For the next 3 days, Julian's studio became their war room. He draped fabrics over her, his hands flying as he pinned and cut. They decided on a color of red so deep it was almost black in the shadows, but that burned like liquid fire in the light. It was the color of blood and wine, the color of vengeance. The design was deceptively simple, a column of silk that clung to her body, with a structured, almost architectural neckline that framed her face and a daringly low back. It was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. This dress isn't for a man's approval, Julian declared as he worked. This dress is a declaration of independence. While Julian forged her physical armor, Amelia began to work on her own strategy. She knew that simply looking powerful wasn't enough. She needed leverage. She needed a weapon. And she knew exactly where to find it. Her mind went back to the Petrocorp merger. Marcus had called it the deal of the decade. He and Isabella had been working on it for over a year. She remembered the early days when Marcus was still sharing his work with her. He had complained endlessly about the complexities of Petrocorp's South American operations, specifically their drilling sites in Ecuador. There were labyrinthine environmental regulations, land disputes with indigenous communities, and a notoriously corrupt local government. Marcus had dismissed these as soft issues, minor hurdles to be handled by the legal grunts. His focus, and Isabella's, was on the financials. The massive oil reserves, the profit margins, the shareholder value. They saw the world in spreadsheets and stock prices. They were blind to the human and environmental cost, not out of malice, but out of a supreme arrogance that believed such things were irrelevant to the bottom line. Emilia started digging. Using the legal research databases she still had access to from her alumni account, she began pulling every file she could find on Petrocorp's Ecuadorian division. She worked late into the night, long after Marcus had fallen asleep. The glow of her laptop screen, her only companion. She cross-referenced news articles from local Spanish-language papers translated indigenous land claim filings and scrutinized satellite images of the drilling sites. On the third night of her search, she found it. It was a single footnote in an obscure environmental impact report filed with a minor regional agency. The report detailed a recent shift in the local laws, a change enacted just 2 months prior that reclassified the land Petrocorp was operating on. It was no longer just commercial land. It was now designated as protected ancestral territory, following a landmark ruling in favor of the local Shuar people. The legal implications were explosive. According to the new statute, any existing commercial contracts would have to be completely renegotiated, with a minimum of 40% of the profits being redirected to a community trust. Furthermore, any environmental damage, past or present, would be subject to massive retroactive fines under the new, stricter regulations. Marcus and Isabella's entire merger valuation was built on the projected profits from those Ecuadorian oil fields. They were counting on a net value of over $10 billion. This new law didn't just reduce that value. It turned a massive asset into a catastrophic liability. The potential fines alone could run into the billions. Not to mention the public relations nightmare of being seen as exploiting an indigenous community. Their deal wasn't just flawed, it was a time bomb. And they were completely unaware of it, because they hadn't bothered to do the real on-the-ground due diligence. They had read the headlines, not the footnotes. Emilia printed everything. She compiled a dossier, clear, concise, and utterly damning. It included the new legislation, the court rulings, translated testimonies from community leaders, and a revised financial projection showing the multi-billion-dollar black hole in the center of their prized deal. The night before the gala, she sat in her silent living room, the finished dossier on the coffee table in front of her. Julian had delivered the dress which now hung in a garment bag in her guest room, a slash of crimson in the dark. Her transformation was nearly complete. She had the armor. She had the weapon. All that was left was the will to use them. For a moment, a wave of doubt washed over her. She thought of the man Marcus used to be the life they had built. Was she really going to destroy him? Then she thought of Isabella's email, the E-problem, keep her managed. She thought of the Cartier necklace, a prize for her replacement. She thought of the years she had sacrificed, the support she had given, all of it, erased and dismissed as a liability. Her doubt hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about vengeance. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her own life. They had written her out of their story. Now she would write the ending. The morning of the gala. Emilia woke before the sunrise. A strange sense of calm had settled over her. The frantic energy of the past few days had receded, leaving behind a quiet, unshakable purpose. She moved through the morning with deliberate grace, making coffee, reading the news, ignoring the palpable thrum of anticipation coming from Marcus's side of the apartment. He was a whirlwind of activity, barking orders into his phone, double-checking his speech, laying out his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He was so consumed by his own impending triumph that he barely registered her presence. To him, she was just part of the furniture. "Wish me luck," he said, pausing at the door before he left for a final prep meeting at the office. He was already wearing his game face, confident, charming, predatory. "You won't need it," Amelia said, her voice even. "You're more prepared than anyone." He smiled, accepting the compliment as his due. "That's right. Tonight, everything changes." He winked at her, a gesture that was meant to be conspiratorial, but felt insulting. "Don't wait up." The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Amelia began her own preparations. There was no stylist, no fuss. Just a methodical, ritualistic transformation. She had booked an appointment at a salon under a different name, a chic, minimalist place in Soho that Julian had recommended. She walked in as Amelia Thorne, the quiet, unassuming wife, with her shoulder-length brown hair and practical no-fuss makeup. She walked out 3 hours later as someone else entirely. Her hair had been cut into a sharp, sophisticated bob that grazed her jawline and dyed a shade of deep sable that made her green eyes look like jewels. Her makeup was striking, but not overwhelming, a smoky eye, a nude lip and skin that seemed to glow from within. Back in the apartment, she laid out the dress. In the light of day, the red silk seemed to have a life of its own. It was more than a garment. It was a statement of intent. As she slipped it on, the fabric felt cool and heavy against her skin, a comforting weight. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror, and for the first time in years, she recognized the woman staring back. It was the woman she had been before Marcus, confident, intelligent, and fiercely independent. The past 10 years had buried her, but she had not disappeared. She accessorized simply. Diamond studs in her ears, her own purchased with her first bonus from the law firm, and a pair of killer heels that made her feel 6 feet tall. No necklace. Her throat was bare. She wanted the space left empty, a silent rebuke to the Cartier diamonds that would be gracing Isabella's neck. The final piece was the dossier. She had condensed the executive summary and key findings onto a single encrypted USB drive small enough to conceal in her clutch. The full printed report was in a sealed envelope addressed to Mr. Alistair Thorne, the Plaza Hotel security. A trusted courier arranged by Julian would deliver it at precisely 9 p.m., 1 hour before the speeches were scheduled to begin. At 7:30 p.m., she was ready. She stood once more by the window looking out at the city. But tonight it didn't look intimidating. It looked like a kingdom. Her kingdom. She had booked a private car to take her to the hotel. As she rode through the glittering streets of Manhattan, she felt no fear, only a profound sense of clarity. She wasn't a woman scorned seeking petty revenge. She was a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover of her own life. She arrived at the plaza and chose not to use the main entrance. Instead, she entered through a side door, leading to the residence, bypassing the red carpet and the throng of photographers. She had no interest in their cameras. Her audience was inside. She took a moment in a quiet alcove, her clutch in her hand, the weight of the small USB drive, a tangible reminder of her purpose. She could hear the muffled sound of the orchestra and the buzz of hundreds of conversations from the grand ballroom down the hall. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she began to walk. The doors to the ballroom were massive ornate sentinels of gilded wood. As she approached, two ushers moved to stop her, their eyes politely questioning, searching for an invitation she did not have. She didn't break her stride. She simply looked at them, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I'm Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice low and clear. "Please open the doors." There was something in her tone, a quiet authority, so absolute that they didn't question it. They looked at each other for a split second, then as if compelled by an unseen force, they each took a handle and pulled. The doors swung inward, and the wall of sound and light hit her. The grand ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, a universe of power and influence. And as Amelia paused on the threshold framed by the doorway, a hush began to fall. It started at the back of the room and spread like a wave, a ripple of silence moving through the crowd as heads turned one by one. Conversations faltered. Glasses were lowered. The orchestra's melody seemed to thin and then fade away into nothing. In the space of 10 seconds, the entire room, 500 of the most powerful people in New York, had fallen completely silent. Every eye was on her. Across the vast expanse of the ballroom, she saw him. Marcus was standing near the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand, Isabella Ricci beside him. Isabella was radiant in a silver-sequined gown, the Cartier diamond and sapphire necklace blazing at her throat. They were laughing at something someone had said, the very picture of a power couple. Then Marcus felt the shift in the room. His smile wavered, and he turned his head, following the gaze of the crowd. His eyes found Amelia. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished marble floor. The sound echoed in the cavernous silence. His face went white, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost, a beautiful, terrifying ghost in a blood-red dress. Isabella, annoyed by the interruption, turned to see what had caused the commotion. Her practiced smile froze on her lips, her eyes widening in disbelief before narrowing into slits of pure venom. The necklace, her trophy, suddenly seemed garish and desperate. Amelia held their gazes for a beat longer. She had their attention. She had everyone's attention. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, she began to walk into the room. Her heels clicked against the marble, the only sound in the dead silence. It was not the walk of a wife. It was the entrance of a queen. The walk across the ballroom floor felt like a mile. With every step, Amelia could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes on her, a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and sheer astonishment. Whispers started to erupt like brush fires in the silence. "Who is that?" "That's Amelia Thorne, Marcus's wife." "I don't believe it." "What is she doing here? I heard they were separated." She ignored them all. Her focus was laser-sharp, fixed on the stage at the far end of the room, and the two figures standing beside it, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Marcus looked like he had been struck by lightning, his mouth slightly agape, his skin pale and clammy. Isabella had recovered more quickly. Her shock had morphed into a mask of icy fury. If looks could kill, Amelia would have been incinerated on the spot. Amelia didn't approach them directly. That would be too simple, too much like a domestic squabble. Instead, she changed her trajectory, moving towards the side of the room, where a formidable silver-haired man was standing, watching the entire scene with shrewd, intelligent eyes. Alistair Thorne, the patriarch of the family and the undisputed king of this empire. He was a man who valued control and order above all else. An unexpected disruption at his gala would be infuriating to him. Emilia was counting on it. As she approached, Alistair's expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and stern disapproval. He had always been civil to Emilia, but in a distant, formal way. He saw her, she knew, as little more than a necessary but unremarkable accessory for his ambitious son. "Emilia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is unexpected." "Alistair," she replied, her tone respectful but firm. She met his gaze without flinching. "I apologize for the unorthodox entrance. There's a matter of urgent corporate importance that I needed to bring to your attention personally." His eyebrows shot up. "Corporate importance? My dear, this is a party, not a board meeting." "Sometimes the two overlap," she said smoothly. "A courier delivered a package to your security team at 9 p.m. I would urge you to review its contents at your earliest convenience. It pertains to the Petrocorp merger." Alistair's eyes narrowed. He was a man who could smell risk from a mile away. The seriousness in her voice, the utter lack of hysteria, had put him on high alert. He gave a curt nod, his gaze flicking over towards his son, who was now desperately trying to regain his composure. At that moment, the event's master of ceremonies, seeing the prolonged and awkward silence, decided to reclaim control of the evening. His booming voice filled the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, a little unexpected excitement to keep us on our toes. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two of Thorn Industries' brightest minds, who have spearheaded a deal that will redefine our company for the next century. Please welcome to the stage the architects of the Petrocorp merger, Isabella Ricci and Marcus Thorn." A polite but slightly hesitant round of applause filled the room. The spell was broken. Marcus, jolted back to life by the announcement, shot Emilia a look of pure panic before plastering a shaky smile on his face and gesturing for Isabella to precede him towards the stage. Isabella ascended the steps with a predatory grace. She was a performer, and this was her stage. She straightened her shoulders, the Cartier necklace glittering under the spotlights like a weapon. She was going to seize back the narrative, to erase Emilia's disruptive entrance with the force of her own charisma. She stepped up to the podium, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, deliberately ignoring Emilia. "Thank you," she began, her voice smooth as silk, radiating confidence. "Tonight, we are not just celebrating another successful year. We are celebrating the dawn of a new era for Thorn Industries." She was brilliant. Emilia had to give her that. She spoke with passion and precision, outlining the strategic advantages of the Petrocorp acquisition. She painted a vivid picture of market dominance, of unprecedented growth, of a future where Thorn Industries was not just a player, but the undisputed leader in the global energy sector. The crowd was captivated. The whispers about Emilia's appearance died down, replaced by murmurs of approval. "This monumental achievement," Isabella continued, her voice swelling, "was not the work of one person. It required a team with vision, courage, and a relentless drive for excellence. It required a partner who was not afraid to take risks, to challenge conventions, and to work tirelessly towards a shared goal." She turned and smiled at Marcus, who was standing a few feet behind her, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "Marcus Thorn is that partner. His support and leadership were instrumental every step of the way." The phrasing was clever. His support. She positioned him as her second, the helpful assistant to her visionary leadership. She was claiming the victory and the VP role as her own right here in front of everyone. In a different context, Emilia might have felt a flicker of satisfaction at seeing Marcus subtly undermined. Isabella's speech reached its crescendo. The Petrocorp deal isn't just a contract, it's a promise of a stronger, more profitable, and more powerful future for every single person in this room. Thank you. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. The disruption was forgotten. Isabella was triumphant. She had won. She stood there basking in the adoration of the crowd, the diamonds on her neck flashing like victory fireworks. She glanced towards Emilia, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. It was a clear final dismissal. You lost. The MC stepped back to the microphone. Incredible thank you, Isabella Ricci. And now a few words from her partner in this historic success, Marcus Thorne. Marcus walked to the podium, looking rattled. Isabella had just taken 90% of the credit for their shared project, and his wife, who was supposed to be at home, was standing in the audience, looking like a spectre at the feast. He cleared his throat, shuffling his notes. He was supposed to build on Isabella's momentum to seal their joint victory. But before he could utter a single word, Emilia began to move. She didn't run or shout. She simply walked from her position at the side of the room towards the small set of stairs at the front of the stage, her expression serene, her purpose clear. The crowd, sensing another shift in the drama, quieted once more. Marcus saw her coming. His eyes widened in terror. Emilia, what are you doing? He hissed, his voice just loud enough to be caught by the microphone. A faint, desperate plea that echoed through the ballroom. She didn't answer him. She reached the stairs, ascended them with a regal calm, and walked directly towards the center of the stage. She stopped beside the podium, taking the second microphone from its stand. She stood there side by side with her husband's mistress, the betrayed wife and the triumphant lover, both bathed in the unforgiving glare of the spotlight. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Isabella's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and rage. Marcus looked like he was about to faint. Emilia leaned towards the microphone. Her voice when she spoke was not loud, but it was so clear and steady that it carried to the farthest corner of the vast room. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Emilia Thorne, and I have a few notes on the presentation." The silence that followed Emilia's opening line was not just an absence of noise. It was a living entity, thick with tension and anticipation. Every person in the grand ballroom was holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. They expected tears, accusations, a messy public airing of a domestic dispute. It was the kind of delicious high society scandal they secretly craved. Emilia gave them none of it. She stood at the podium, a picture of composure, the crimson of her dress, a stark contrast to Isabella's shimmering silver. She was not a hysterical wife. She was an executive about to deliver a correction. Ms. Ricci's presentation was compelling. Emilia began, her voice calm and measured as she turned slightly to acknowledge Isabella. The use of the formal Ms. Ricci was a deliberate surgical strike. It stripped away the intimacy and recast Isabella as a mere professional colleague. Her passion is undeniable. However, in their relentless drive for excellence, it appears she and my husband have overlooked a critical piece of due diligence. A piece that doesn't just alter the valuation of the Petrocorp merger, but in fact turns it into one of the most catastrophic liabilities Thorne Industries has ever faced. A collective gasp went through the audience. This was not about an affair. This was about money. Billions of dollars of it. The mood shifted instantly from salacious curiosity to cold, hard fear. Investors gripped their wine glasses, their faces paling. Board members leaned forward in their seats. Marcus finally found his voice. "Emilia, stop this," he pleaded, stepping toward her. "You don't know what you're talking about." "On the contrary, Marcus," she replied, not even glancing at him. Her focus was on the audience, on the powerful men and women whose fortunes were tied to the company. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ecuador, specifically Petrocorp's operations in the Sucumbíos province." She saw a flicker of recognition in Alistair Thorne's eyes. He was already connecting the dots. "While you and Miss Ricci were focused on the top-line revenue from those oil fields," Emilia continued, her voice gaining strength, "you seem to have missed the ruling of the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court on May 17th of this year. The ruling in the case of Shuar Nation vs. the Ministry of Energy fundamentally reclassified 2.5 million acres of land, including the land on which Petrocorp's primary drilling sites are located, as protected ancestral territory." She paused, letting the weight of that information sink in. She could see the confusion on the faces of the executives. This was obscure, foreign legal detail. "What does this mean in practical terms?" she asked, her tone becoming that of a lecturer. "It means two things. First, under the new Indigenous Rights Act, any existing commercial contracts on this land are subject to renegotiation with a mandatory 40% profit-sharing agreement, payable to the Shuar Community Trust." A wave of audible shocks and curses swept through the room. The $10 billion asset had just had $4 billion wiped from its value. Isabella finally broke her stunned silence. That's a lie," she stammered, grabbing the podium for support. "Our legal team vetted everything." "That would have been flagged, would it?" Emilia countered, her voice turning sharp. "Did your $500 an hour New York lawyers read the footnotes in reports from a regional environmental agency? Did they translate the court filings that were only published in the local Spanish dialect? Or did they just read the English-language summaries provided by Petrocorp's own internal team? The same team that had every reason to hide this inconvenient truth until the ink on your deal was dry." She didn't need an answer. The panicked look exchanged between Marcus and Isabella was answer enough. They had been played, and their arrogance had made them easy marks. "But it gets worse," Emilia said, her voice dropping, drawing the audience in closer. "The second implication of the ruling is the retroactive environmental liability. The new law allows for fines to be levied for all environmental damages incurred since the start of operations. Given Petrocorp's well-documented history of oil spills and deforestation in the region, my conservative estimate based on the fine per hectare schedule outlined in the statute places the immediate liability at approximately $6 billion. The room erupted. People were standing up, shouting questions. The $10 billion asset was now a $10 billion liability. The deal of the decade had become the poison pill of the century. Emilia raised her hand for silence, and miraculously, she got it. This information, including the relevant statutes, court documents, and a revised financial projection, was delivered to your chairman, Mr. Alistair Thorne, an hour ago, she announced. "I've also taken the liberty of putting the executive summary onto a drive." She held up the small USB stick from her clutch. "For your convenience." She then turned for the first time to look directly at Marcus. The man she had loved, the man she had built, was staring at her with a look of utter devastation. He wasn't just ruined, he was annihilated, and he knew in that moment that she had done it. Her gaze shifted to Isabella. The triumphant queen of the Gala was now just a woman in a silver dress, her face a mask of horror, her career and reputation evaporating under the hot glare of the spotlights. Emilia's voice softened, but lost none of its power. It became personal, intimate, yet every word was a sahurhund, was a dagger meant for the entire room to hear. This deal was built on a lie of omission, she said, her eyes locked on Isabella. A dangerous, expensive lie, born of arrogance and greed. But that seems to be a recurring theme tonight. Her gaze drifted down to the glittering Cartier necklace. A beautiful piece, diamonds and a sapphire. A trophy, I imagine. A prize for a job well done. Isabella instinctively raised a hand to her throat, as if to hide it. But like the merger, it was meant to celebrate. Emilia concluded, her voice ringing with a final devastating clarity. It is built on a foundation of deceit, and anything built on such a foundation will eventually collapse. She placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. She didn't look at Marcus or Isabella again. She turned her back on them, on the stage, on the life they had tried to steal from her. In absolute silence, she descended the stairs. The crowd parted for her as she walked, a sea of stunned faces turning to watch her go. She reached Alistair Thorne, who was standing rigid, his face like a thundercloud. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. He didn't speak. He just gave her a single, sharp nod. It was all the confirmation she needed. Emilia continued her walk, her head held high, her steps even and unhurried. She walked through the parted crowd, across the marble floor, and towards the grand gilded doors. She didn't look back. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the hallway, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 careers, 1 multi-billion-dollar deal, and a life that no longer belonged to her. The doors swung shut behind her, cutting off the explosion of chaos that erupted in the ballroom. The war was over, and she had won. The Gala's implosion was immediate and spectacular. By morning, the financial world was ablaze with the story of Thorne Industries' averted catastrophe, and Emilia's name was on the lips of every analyst and news anchor. She was the brilliant, mysterious woman who had saved the company from itself. Ignoring the media frenzy, Emilia disappeared from the public eye, finding sanctuary away from the chaos. The consequences for Marcus and Isabella were brutal and swift. Acting with surgical precision, Alistair Thorne convened an emergency board meeting at dawn. Before the stock market opened, a press release announced the termination of the Petrocorp merger. Marcus Thorne and Isabella Ricci were fired for gross negligence, their careers publicly and irrevocably shattered. Isabella vanished. Marcus, disgraced, desperately tried to contact Emilia with a barrage of voicemails, swinging between remorse and rage. She deleted them all unheard and filed for divorce the next day. Her request was simple. She wanted nothing from their life together, but her freedom. In the following months, Emilia rebuilt. She secured a business loan, silently co-signed by a grateful Alistair, and opened a boutique consulting firm, Thorne Strategic Advisors. Specializing in ethical risk and corporate governance, her firm was an instant success. Poetically, her first client was Thorne Industries, who hired her to audit their international projects, paying her handsomely to prevent the very kind of disaster she had exposed. 6 months after the gala, Emilia was walking through Central Park. Her new life was her own, defined by a peaceful apartment in the West Village and work that gave her purpose. As she passed the Bethesda Terrace, she saw him. Marcus was sitting on a bench, a ghost of the man he once was. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by worn clothes. The arrogant confidence had been hollowed out, leaving behind only exhaustion. He looked up and their eyes met. He didn't approach, but Emilia found herself walking toward him, compelled to close the final chapter. She stood before him, calm and confident. "Marcus," she said, her voice even. "Emilia," he rasped. "You look good." "I am good," she replied, the words a simple, profound truth. A heavy silence hung between them, filled with the ghosts of their shared past. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered, looking down at his hands. "For everything. I was a fool. I lost everything that mattered because I was chasing things that didn't." Emilia listened, not for him, but for herself. The apology was the final stone falling into place. "Yes, you were," she agreed, her tone devoid of malice. "But people can rebuild, Marcus. From ashes. I did." She looked at the man on the bench one last time, a stranger who wore a familiar face. There was no anger left, only a quiet sense of finality. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said softly. With that, she turned and walked away, into the autumn sunlight, not looking back. She was walking toward her future, a future built not from the ruins of his life, but from the enduring strength of her own. Emilia Thorne's story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to the strength that can be forged in the fires of betrayal. She walked into that gala as a wife who had been dismissed and underestimated, and walked out as the master of her own destiny. By refusing to be a victim, and instead using her intelligence and integrity as her weapons, she not only reclaimed her own life, but also exposed the corrupt foundation of the world that had cast her aside. Her journey reminds us that true power isn't about the name you carry or the wealth you possess, but about the unwavering strength of your own character and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. What did you think of Emilia's incredible transformation? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.